When you think of New York, what comes to mind? A loud, chaotic city? A melting pot of cultures? Busy streets? Tall skyscrapers? A race for money and success? Nightlife and entertainment? Sensory overload? But do you really know New York? Did you know that millions of New Yorkers believe in the afterlife and that the soul survives physical death? The A.R.E. Center, Association for Research and Enlightenment, was founded here in the heart of New York and dedicated to the famous sleeping prophet and father of holistic medicine, Edgar Cayce. John Van Auken is a world-renowned writer who has been a student and teacher of various metaphysical insights for over 40 years. He is a director at the Edgar Cayce Center in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and has authored over 23 books and a dozen videos. In this episode, John Van Auken will give a presentation on Edgar Cayce's story of your soul, its origin, purpose, and ultimate destiny at the A.R.E. Center of New York.
The game plan of content today is the overarching theme is the story of the soul. Each of us has a unique soul journey story, but we travel in soul groups, and there's a collective story that we will enjoy today. I'll begin with some of the overarching, underlying thematic elements of our journey, and then I'm going to get into ancient Egyptian mysticism, which talks a little bit about us. Then I'm going to show you some of the archaeological research A.R.E. has been doing. A.R.E. stands for Association for Research and Enlightenment. And then I'm going to go into reincarnation, karma, memory patterns, soul groups, soulmates, everybody loves soulmates, twin souls, all this sort of stuff. And then we'll go into some of the how do I awaken or develop this fullness in myself consciously now, and some of the techniques that Cayce taught for doing that. Okay? Am I missing anything that someone wants? All right. I'll start to warm up the projector here. I'm going to begin with the rather esoteric, ethereal element of the story. Long before you and I ever get into the earth and this physical body we're in today. Way, way back in the beginning. Actually, I'm going to start before the beginning. Prior to us, there was absolutely nothing, infinitely empty and still. And yet Cayce says in that infinite emptiness was latent the potential to conceive. So infinite emptiness, how could there be something there to conceive? Think of it like your consciousness, but with no thoughts in it, only this was an infinite consciousness. A singular, infinite consciousness, not moving, not thinking. Now you can see how within that universal consciousness, the potential for creation. And as that consciousness moved and started to create light, the idea of light, and playing with light, stars, and playing with stars, galaxies, on and on until it's light on water over pebbles in a brook, all of this just keeps expressing out of this singular great consciousness. And then Edgar Cayce says this singular logos essence conceived out of a motivation of love and expression, countless points of consciousness in its own image, and we were conceived. In the one, the essence of the logos, think of the logos, that first consciousness, all these individual points of light were conceived. And you are one of those. I think I'm right over here. So, in the many is the one. The Mayans have a story very similar to this, in which the great winged serpent god, considered the logos of their thematic pattern, asked all the essences to put their hearts into this effort of creativity and expression and a magnificent journey of free will. And when they put their hearts into it, all the lights of the stars lit up. And our scientists tell us there are more stars in the visible universe than there are grains of sand on every beach and desert on this planet. So there are countless points. Now here's a key point. Edgar says not all of the souls came here. Only some. But certainly all of us here in the room. Each of us ultimately desires to be creative, expressive, because that was a core motivation of us coming into existence. And each of us has a desire, as bitter as we may become, to love and be loved. And those are the two fundamental essences that motivated the singular to create the many. All right, this is even in Scripture, believe it or not. If you look at the opening section to the Gospel of John, and you look at it in the original Greek, not the English translation, you will actually see the word logos used and the concept. Of course, the English Bibles translate the Greek word to word, but logos in Greek means a lot more than the English word word. I can see some of you can't see it from the back, so let me do something really quick here that I know I can do for you. And I will come back to this in a moment. There you go. Now you can see it, right?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Okay. So, it goes like this. One other thing let me explain. In the English translation, the masculine pronoun is used, he. But when you read the original Greek, it is not there. It is used this one. It specifically says this one. Okay? So you're going to see me translate it this way. In the beginning was the Logos, the central essence of all expression of consciousness. And the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. It's a bit paradoxical, so the writer's trying to hold us into an understanding of this. I think they're trying to cool the room off now. The Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. This one was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through this one. And without this one was not anything made that was made. In this one was life, and the life was the light of humanity. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. So this essence of consciousness in the infinity of stillness, and this is the dance we have in meditation, consciousness, stillness, consciousness. This essence of expression in the infinite stillness brought forth countless points of light and gave each one of them free will. Yikes. Yeah.
You said a logos has a broader meaning in Greek. What more or less does, what are the meanings of it?
What I just described, it is the source or essence of all expression of consciousness.
No, but I mean,
Logos. In
logo.
Greek, that's what it means. And you can actually see it when you see Jesus debate with the Pharisees. He uses two Greek words for word. Lalia is the Greek word for what we use in the English word, meaning a word. And so he's arguing with the Pharisees, and he says, the reason you don't understand my Lalian words is because you don't understand my Logan, the essence of the source of all expression. So he's even showing the play. Do you get a feel for it now? Yeah. All of these points are individual consciousnesses with free will. So now they're really dynamic. In the previous, there is a oneness. They haven't moved. They haven't reacted. So you can't tell them from the whole and from the essence. But as soon as an individual consciousness uses its will to react or to express, this individuation process starts, and we all start to become individualized. Individuals within the universal. And actually that was the goal, was for us to use our free will. We were an immature psyche, individualized in the oneness, and allowed to experience it all individually. And the goal was to know yourself, to be yourself, yet one with all of the creation and the source of the Creator. So we have this immature psyche that's been traveling and learning and developing. We're not even into this yet. We're going to get into a body soon, but not yet. We're traveling. We're on a journey of enlightenment. Here are the Edgar Cayce, and you're going to see these throughout my talk. This is the reading number and how many readings are in that section. And if you later want to research it yourself. As the entity moves from sphere to sphere, it seeks its way to the home, or the Om, if you want to get into ethereal things. Home, Om. To the face of the Creator, the Father, the first cause. Cayce identifies the first cause as that the created would be companion to the Creator. So the individual to the universal, the finite to the infinite. And that when this blend starts to happen, then wholeness, contentment, a deep peace comes about, and you feel the fulfillment of your mission, of your existence. This is the reason we were created, and as a result, the created, our soul, is given opportunities to, quote, show itself to be not only worthy of, but companionable to the Creator. Now we're talking about the Creator of the infinite universe and everything in it. So you got to grow a lot to be an interesting companion. So, the essence of that Creator, though, is the spirit of love. And I'm not just saying this from moderns. Ancient sources say this. You'll see this as we go along today. But I want you to realize you are much bigger than you feel today as a personality in an incarnate body that's aging on you and dealing with other people. You ultimately have parts to you that are companionable to the Creator of infinity. Why don't we hold questions until I get through this a little bit? Otherwise, this is going to take a lot longer. Okay, one of the major processes you and I are on is called individuation. And some of the depth psychologists have become aware of this over the last 200 years and published a lot of material on it. Probably the leader being Carl Jung. Are you guys familiar with Jungian psychology? Individuation is something you personally know about, especially if you've had children. But all of you were a child, so you know individuation. But when you have that little baby come out, that little baby thinks it's part of your flesh, and it can't tell the difference between your body and its body, and it grows, and eventually it journeys a little bit away from you, but it runs back. Its oneness is with you. But as it continues to grow and you continue to help it individuate, discover itself, and I can tell you, having 3 children, right out of the womb, you can feel the difference in the essence of this bugger from that bugger. They haven't had any chance except genetics. I haven't socialized them, I haven't pitched anything to them, and they are already different. You can feel it. Oh, sometimes you go, oh, and sometimes you go, oh. Individuation, the uniqueness of the soul. Then they grow and they become teenagers. And now all they want is the keys to the car. They don't want to hear any more of your ideas. They've listened to you. Now they want to go find out for themselves. The same story is true at your soul level. The Creator knew the potential challenges of giving free will. Yet that was the only way you were going to become a co-creator. You were going to grow into the essence of being companionable, was to have the freedom to find your way and make choices that we're either compatible or incompatible and grow into this position. So, as Edgar Cayce says, do something, right or wrong, do something, because you engage the free will. And in the doing comes the understanding. Here's Ouspensky. Now, Edgar Cayce didn't recommend too many books, but he did recommend Ouspensky, and one of them was Tertia Morganum. I happen to be quoting from The Psychology of Man's Possible Evolutions, because this relates to what we're dealing with. Our aim is to become one, to have one permanent I. In other words, to discover the real self, yourself, the dynamic self integrated. But in the beginning, Ouspensky says, work means to become more and more divided. You must realize how far you are from being one. And only when you know all these fractions of yourself can work begin on one or more principal I's, around which unity can be built. It would be wrong understanding to unify all the things you find in yourself now. The new I is something you do not know at present. It grows from something you can trust. At first, in separating false personality from you, try to divide yourself into what you call reliable and what you find unreliable. And you'll find that even more dynamic in your relationships, because others will help you find the part of you that you might want to change and the part of you that they really like. And you are doing that within yourself as well. So you are on a process of discovering the real, totally integrated I, and all the aspects that make it richer and all the aspects that impede it or fracture it. This is the development that you're on at a soul level. I still haven't got us into this thing yet. You realize we're a traveling essence of life with a consciousness and freedom. I haven't got us into the third dimension. Now it's time to go to a realm where individuation is really possible. A realm in which we stick you into a singular body separated from everybody else. Now you're really going to start to individualize, and of course the realm of form, of third dimension, takes the infinite into finite expression individually. Now, the infinite's latent within the individual, but the paradox of appearance is separateness. And each one of us is encased in a separate body. Edgar Cayce says that this is written in the book of Job. The morning stars, us, sang together, and all the children of God, us, shouted for joy at the coming of humanity. We thought it was a good idea at the time. I don't know how you feel about it now. But all the light beings are coming out of light form into physical form. And Earth is the dynamic place for this. And ancient Mu, or Lemuria, Cayce says, was the first essence of this, but we're not into physical bodies that we know today. We're expressing ourselves as light beings. The Egyptians call the Aku, the star being, the light essence of you. Then Cayce says we started to shape what we would call thought form. And so coming out of the essence of light, we started to take on the structure of a thought form. He tries to show us that in the one dimension, there is no way you can discover the second dimension. It doesn't exist in the first. It is totally perpendicular to that reality. Therefore, you do have to have an alternate conscious experience, a breakthrough of another dynamic. And once you do, suddenly you're aware of the two dimensions, and you live in two dimensions. But the third dimension doesn't exist in the two. You have to have another breakthrough, a mental lift off beyond any reality in the first and second dimension. This is the fantastic journey of the mind as the builder, Cayce says. And when the mind breaks through, suddenly you perceive the next dimension, and there's the 3 dimensions. And we know that dimension very well. Now you're all probably thinking, okay, where's John going to draw that next line? Well, here's the 4th dimension. I'm going to take this cube of the 3rd dimension, and I'm going to bring it out here and ask you to use your mind to visualize that cube existing there. Can you see the cube? Can you imagine the cube? Come on, all of you. You paid your money. Get your money's worth. Can you? If you visualize that cube, that is a thought form. You have now shaped this into a structural form of thought only, using your imaginative forces. And that's what we were doing, starting to shape ourselves. So what is happening? A sort of collective being is moving into individuation in thought. I am now thinking of myself as unique from you in a thought structure, and that's a thought form. And that eventually starts to crystallize into physical form using what we know forms crystals, nucleation. It's formed by crystals, and the best way to sort of see us do this is to think of the vaporous atmosphere that we live in, the beautiful vaporous atmosphere. And it starts to condense and get tighter, and then it conceives of the snowflake, which is a crystal, but a very delicate crystallization. You see, you're starting to come out of this now. You're starting to come into form. The form is very light. It's gossamer. But eventually it keeps coming down until it's a crystal, the physical stones that we see, and you crystallize into physical form. Then you have to move into material matter, and that's a journey that takes a little while longer. So, spirit and mind into matter and bodily form. Here is a marvelous sculpture piece from Asia, showing that it happens through the crown chakra, that your divine essence, your life essence, your spirit essence, that comes into the physical form through the crown chakra. Edgar says when the little baby body is developed and the soft spot or fontanelle in the top of the head, the soul comes in through the fontanelle, pushes itself through the nervous system into the body, and then it's sealed over. And you are encased in a physical body for a sojourn. This is troubling you. Well, can you hold the question for just a little bit? So, this essence here. Now, how did we come to this essence? Well, as you know, most of the evidence on the earth shows that it was through the line of the monkey, and eventually genetics and husbandry of genetics brought us to a point, and then there was the missing link. There's no clear leap from the evolution of the material expression of the chimpanzee or orangutan body, which has 98% the same genome that we do. But believe me, that 2% is very important. And the great frontal lobe. None of the others have the frontal lobe size we do. Those are very important. But there's no actual break, and Cayce says that missing link was the leap of the creative forces realizing the morning stars were coming into matter, and we had to get a form for them that worked. And so that form started. And so now this is the way you come and go through this. Now, a little aside, Edgar said most people die through the portal of the solar plexus. He preferred they die through the crown chakra. You leave your body when you're passing through the upper portal. So when Hugh Lin was dying, his son Charles Thomas, who was my colleague for about 30 years, they slowly practiced this while his father was dying in the hospital. So Hugh Lin would let himself easily go out through the portal of the solar plexus, then he would come back and say, oh man, that didn't feel quite as ideal. Then he would try to leave the portal of his body through the crown. He would say, oh, that felt so much better. And they did this for hours while his body was losing its functionality. And eventually he left and didn't come back, and and you have what we call death of the body. Lemuria, most of the scholars say, comes from the word lemur, and they associate it with this little creature. But actually the word lemur comes from a Latin word that means ghost. And that's what we were like in Lemuria. We were not in solid bodies. We were like spirits or ghosts. Then eventually we come more and more, descending more and more into matter, and you have some of these ancient symbols that show the great Kundalini coiled, the great essence of the creative force within us, and the hood of the cobra, which is not in this drawing. And this is not a skill saw. This is a chakra spinning, and the sound of infinity through the conch shell, and of course, lotus blossom. We'll see more of this as we go on. Now, you got to understand, you're bringing in a dynamic light being of the universe into the third dimension of material matter. Edgar says, before the evolution of matter, there was an involution out of spirit in which we were extremely powerful, very wise, and our mythology of a time of gods and gods with very much human nature was a true period. And even some of our archaeologists today say that they find megalithic structures around the planet so sophisticated, of such magnitude of weight and size, so perfectly oriented to celestial events, that it doesn't fit with the theory of evolution. The loincloth people should have been growing corn, and here they were able to build a pyramid of 2,300,000 stones, some of which weigh so much we only have 2 cranes on the planet that could lift them. That makes no sense in the evolutionary theory. And Edgar simply says you're missing the involution period, and we're coming back now and starting to become more aware of it. However, before the perfect body was formed, there were only animal forms here, and Cayce says that the myths or the legends of creatures that were half horse, half man, half woman, half fish, are true, but they weren't captured in that. They could come and go. The Hopis say for a long period of time the door to heaven was open and you could come and go, but when you came, if you wanted to fully experience, there were no human bodies, and a lot of this period was this crazy period of pushing your way into animal forms that were here, or even enchanted forest, plant forms and all. He now says that transmigration, which is what this is called, no longer occurs. He said the law of this dimension was everything should give seed to itself. So there was a period of readjustment to clean this up. And now human spirits only go into human forms, and birds into bird, and feline into feline, and canine into canine, and so forth. But you can actually see in people the essence of the first animal sort of totem they touched. You can see people, they look a certain way. Some look a little bit like a bird, some like a bear. They have the essence of that because that was the first they touched. If you're familiar with a psychologist, Adler, you know that the first poignant experience you have cuts a groove in your psyche. And that groove tells you what's life's like. And if you've been touched and loved and it's warm and receptive and gentle, that's what life's like. If you're left and it's cold and empty and distant, that's what life's like. And you grow with that. Well, Cayce says your soul had the same experience, and the first things you experience cut a groove in you, and that groove is an innate expression. So we can actually see some of this, and you will have an affinity towards certain animals and not towards others because of this latent deep within you essence. The intention that got away from us. The intention was to be able to partake of physicality, but not be a part of saying. More and more feeding upon these sources from which you emanate, or of the spiritual life was the intention, so that the physical body, the mental body, are attuned to the soul forces, your soul source, your creator, your maker, in such a way and a manner as you develop spiritually, even though you're in a physical form. Good spirits and bad spirits was a concept in Cayce's essence. These that partake of the earth or of the carnal forces, rather than of those forces that are of the spiritual creative, those that are constructive are of the good, and the destructive are the devilish. Hence the greater development of that called occult or psychic forces, the use of same and the abuse of same during the Atlantean period was during its first 1,000 years. Most of us have both of these within us. And if you've ever dated and then got married, you know that. As sweet and nice as we can be, we usually have a little devilish side, and we like to play with it occasionally. So that's an element of your dynamic. And that's what makes life interesting, makes growth interesting, makes people interesting. Also, you change as you go through phases in your life. Some of the guys I went to high school with who were real bad guys are pretty good guys today. You know, it's amazing they changed. And some of the real good guys are in jail today. I don't know what happened, but they flipped the switch. Long, long ago. Mu and Lemuria, this is Cayce again. We find the entity was in that land that has been termed Zu. Zu was closer to India, what we would call India today. Or Lemuria. Now Lemuria was a region inside Mu. Mu was a huge continent. Lemuria was a region within it, like Pocina within Atlantis. This was before the sojourn of peoples in perfect body form. So you see, we're not in the body yet, and you're still here having a lot of fun, doing a lot of things, getting in a lot of trouble, and you haven't even gotten into a physical body. Rather, when they may be said to have been able to, through those developments of the period, be in the body or out of the body, exactly what the Hopi have a legend of. You could come and go as you please, and act upon materiality or leave materiality. Before that, we find the entity was in that land now known as the American during the periods when there were the sojourning of those from the land of Mu or Lemuria. The Hopi have this legend. They island hopped from somewhere way into the Pacific to the North American continent and the three mesas they have today. And they island hopped through a voice through their soft spot that guided their people. This is written in their lore. And they came to North America migrating from Mu or Lemuria. Okay? The entity then was then among the first of those that were born in what is now portions of Arizona and of Utah, and among those that established the lands there for the building up or growing up of that civilization in those experiences. Before that, we find the entity was in the land now known as or called the Gobi. And when Edgar described the Gobi, he said it was a lush place, not a desert like it is today. He also said we built the Golden Temple there, and it's underground, and when we discover it, everyone will realize evolution can't be the only story, because no one could build it today. Or that we're in the lands now called Indochina or Siam, India, or the Zulu. This is interesting because that is Gladys's note. She thought the Zulu was Africa, so she put a question mark. When I talked with her, she said, I just wanted to say, I don't know how Zulu, but that's what he said, and I wrote it down. So you have to understand, this is a stenographer trying to take this down, and he's moving. Land and Mu or Lemuria were combined with the teachings of many people. There was a lot of correspondence going on. And amazingly, Edgar said we had the power of flight. We were flying. We were communicating all around the planet, and there was only one language. The Tower of Babel hadn't occurred. Edgar said, don't forget these things. You guys all spoke the same language, and you were able to travel all around the planet and leave the planet anytime you wanted or come back. We don't see that today because we're so into matter, but it's coming back. It's coming back. Before that, we find the entity was in the land now known as, or called, the Mongoloid land, Mongolia, during those periods of the activities in the city of gold. Yea, in the attempts of the teachers from Egypt, pre-Rata, though I want to explain. And he got a lot of readings, gave a lot of readings for people who were actually prior to Rata. From India, from Atlantis, as well as from the land of Mu and Lu, or Lemuria, or the teachers from the Nordic land. Odin, Thor, all those metaphysical concepts, the idea of the heavens, all that, the Nordic legends are a part of this great whole. I think that's why they appeal so much to humans today, because they touch a truth they once knew so well. We're correlating all truths as one truth. All of such were a portion of the experiences, for the entity was as a minister or teacher or princess and journeyed to many of those lands. Now the reason, you have to understand, prior to the Great Flood, Edgar Cayce said feminine was dominant. Feminine ruled the planet. When he would give a reading, as he went back in their past lives, he would hit a period in which the women were all in charge. If you go to Mexico and Monte Alban, the White Mountain in Oaxaca, these ancient people, primitives of course, were the apex of evolution, chopped the top of a mountain off, leveled it, and they built a huge spiritual center there out of stone. Now the archaeologists say that the mountain used to be surrounded by water, so it was a major sea island. And on it is a stela, in which grandmother is holding the mace of power, and on that stela, a stela is a stone record carved with picture and words. She is handing the mace of power to grandson. And Edgar explains that's the shift from the age of feminine or yin to the age of masculine or yang. And we're now shifting towards the harmony of the two. The relationship of infinity to each other, each entity, and that there is no respecter of persons except as to how and why each entity, as a spark of infinity, magnifies or uses its relationship, not for self-indulgence or gratification, but for the glory of that which is the source of light, of all that pertains to light. Most of us, this sort of describes a midlife crisis. You can gain everything, 2 cars in the garage, chicken in the pot, money in the bank, good-looking spouse, and you still ain't happy. And about 40 or 50, you go, I got it all, and I'm not happy. This is the why. You haven't touched the source of your existence, that latent thing within you that you ache for, home or om or infinity. And you've got to contact it, whether you're rich or poor, good looking or bad, happy or sad. For every spark of light, whether in the spiritual, the mental, or the material sense, must have its inception in infinity. Now, for a finite being to conceive this takes Ouspensky's mental breakthrough. You're going to have to break out of finite consciousness. As the peoples were a peaceful peoples, and Plato said originally they were, but eventually they became warriors, their developments took on that form with the developing into the physical material bodies. Now the Hopi say 2 ages passed with no hard physical form. Then the 3rd age, the children of God, their little stories help us get it. The children of God went to Mother God and said, we're in deep trouble. We're in this world. It's possessing us. We can't seem to overcome it. And she creates the blue maize people. That's the first time a material body is made. So we have 2 major ages that go on for millions of years, in which we're here more like ghosts, thought forms, light being. Then we have a 2nd age that's of millions of years. But we're getting deeper into matter. We're touching animal forms. We're looking through animal sensory systems. In other words, you could take your mind and go into the nervous system of the animal and look into this dimension, the lowest levels of this dimension, and sense it. All this is going, but we don't have a human body yet until the third age, when the Maya legend says Mother God created the blue maize people, perfect in every way. And that became the perfect body. The first development, or the using of the elements about them to their own usage, recognizing themselves to be part of that about them. Hence, as to the supplying of that necessary to sustain life. And what he's touching on here is early Atlanteans didn't masticate food. They drew on the elements of prana, or life essence, around them. Like just breathing in, they were able to take the life essence of the life force in the realm. They didn't have to crush the cellular structure and ingest the life essence out of a physical. You get, it's bizarre, but we're trying to break through to fourth dimensional awareness. So they didn't masticate food. They existed by assimilating the essence of all the vibes and the energetics and the creative forces in the life. It's hard. And then gradually we started with apparel, and we started to get bodily needs going, and we became more and more into matter, deeper and deeper in matter, and the developments in form related to what we have today, and preparing for those things that would pertain to that which would be termed, see, we're still in the aerial or electric age. You were more a dynamic focus of electrical, aerial, auric energy than you were a flesh body with bone and muscle. And you were able to actually transpose yourself from one place to another. So bilocation and all these things that we think are fantastic today were natural to us back then. We did it like more with thought because we were more minds than bodies. It's weird. Okay, here's Cayce's timeline. 4.6 billion years ago, we began to look at the dimension with our great minds and our soul sweeping in soul group, the morning stars. 12 million years ago was the first influx, which he calls the first root race, but we were like ghosts, not in bodies. Then 10 million years ago was the second influx, still in Lemuria, more like thought form projections, crystallizing denser and denser into individualization. And then here comes the Atlantean civilization and the blue maize people. First entry into a body. At first, just like it says in Genesis, the body was androgynous because the soul's androgynous. So the body had male and female. And Edgar explained in one reading that if you had soul buddies in your soul group and they wanted to come in with you and you were in body form, you would conceive, you had both yin and yang within you, you would conceive within you another physical form, birth it so your soul group could start to come in. And these would be really divine people in the temple creating perfect body forms, blue maize body forms, and everybody was coming in, but they were all androgynous. If you read Genesis carefully and you finally get to chapter 2, well, let me show you. In chapter 1, the author's very clever, but we usually miss it. We are created in the image of Elohim, if you read it in Hebrew, Elohim. In chapter 2, Yahweh Elohim, which an English Bible will translate Lord God. In chapter 1, they'll translate Elohim, God. Chapter 2, Lord God, takes the dust of the earth, shapes it, breathes the breath of life, and we become living, incarnate beings. You got it? But a few verses later, God notices we're lonely in this realm of duality. So he casts a deep sleep over the androgynous being and pulls out the feminine. In Hebrew, kava, which literally means in feminine, the life giver, the life essence, and pulls her out. Now, if you knew Hebrew, you'd know that rib and side are the same word. A side of beef, a rib of beef. So it was some male translating this darn thing, and he used the word rib when he could have easily used the word side in English. So now you have, and if they had only named the masculine side Bob, we would have had this. Eve and Bob. But what they did was, the Hebrew word Adam with a little a means a being. And in the book of Numbers, they translate it that way, the whole book, which really bugs me, as a being, a person. But in Genesis, they don't. The same word, same Hebrew word, as a man. And that screws our heads up. It makes us think masculinity is the ideal out of which femininity came. It's not the case. Androgyny was separated. And so now you take the little a and you capitalize it. Of course, in Hebrew, as soon as you capitalize it, it becomes a personal name. Unfortunately, it would have been better if we had done Bob. So you get the idea. Now we're separated. So you and I were created in the image of the Creator. Then we were changed and created into singular form by the dust of the earth. And that wasn't enough. I'm only male. And yet my soul is feminine. You're only female. And Carl Jung, in his wonderful depth psychology says, if you want to have full consciousness, you have to get in touch with the other part of yourself, which is just behind the veil. So for me, my feminine nature, so that I get a bigger consciousness of my whole self, is just behind the veil. And I have to get in touch with that. You females, just behind your veil is the masculine. You have to, so you have this wholeness. And over the last 40 years in North America, we've all been doing that. Men have been trying to get in touch with their feminine, and it's been hell. But we've been trying. And women are getting in touch with their masculine, and it's been hell. But they're trying. To show you the generational change, my mom and dad are 94 and 93. Mom's soon to be 95. And my dad would come over to my house with my wife and kids, and he would go straight to the dining room table and sit down. And I'd have to go, hey, Dad, you can't do that, man. Come on, we're going to help set the table. We're going to get the... He said, your mom will do that. I said, yeah, I'm not worried about my mom. It's my wife. Get up. After dinner, he'd get up and go in the other room and say, come on in, let's talk. I said, whoa, 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 we can't do this. Come on back. We're going to help clean up and get everything. Your mom will do that. I said, it's not my mom. I'm worried about that. Showing that he had a whole generational perspective, totally different. Well, he's not that way anymore. That was a long time ago. He was 70 back then. That was 20 years ago.
That was evolved.
Right. He's evolved now. He's evolved. He has a sense of this balance. So let's go through it some more. So the third race really comes in about 106,000 BC. We're divided into two separate bodies, feminine and masculine. Now we don't have an androgynous body. You have feminine and masculine bodies. 50,700 is the first breakup of Atlantis into 5 islands. And then the second breakup, 28,000, and then the Great Flood. Genesis 6, in which the author talks about starting over completely, cleansing the earth, getting rid of the Nephilim and all the sons of God and the daughters of men and all this diversity that got all mucked up. Start over, and now we have the fourth root race, which is the Adamic body that you and I have been using in various forms for about 400,000 years, according to our anthropologists, biologists, and psychologists, archaeologists. About 400,000 years you can find this type of body. But there were various prototypes of it. Oh, when you get older than that, you can't find this body, any remnants of it. Of course, you can't find ghost bones. So you're not going to dig up a Lemurian.
Right.
You understand? Yeah.
What's negativity shifts motivations?
Negativity shifts motivations. In 50,700 BC, Cayce says, a new attitude developed among the collective group of humanity that fits what he described as the themes that we have: survival of the fittest, everyone for themselves, get all the gusto you can get, the weak should be used, abused, and enslaved, the strong are dominant. And when that theme started to develop, it created negative energies. Animals were subordinate to humans. You conquered them, you killed them, you ate them if you wanted to. See what I mean? All of that shift changed the vibes of the earth.
What caused that shift? How did that happen? How did they become
What
negative
caused the
and
shift?
arrogant?
In the course of becoming individual, you became self-aware and lost a sense of the oneness. And therefore, you are you, but I am me. And I lost the sense, no, at one level, you're a part of the whole, the same whole I come from, but that's lost. And the easiest thing you can do with an army is make the enemy out to be less than human, and you now can kill. You see what I'm saying? You tag them with names and stuff, and that separation starts, and then you can be brutal. And if you look at animals and ignore the essence of the spirit of life in them, now you can subordinate them and you're dominant, and you can do things that are not healthy, you know, not balanced. You see what I'm saying? You have to create the dynamic of this is me, this is us, we're together, and all the rest are a bunch of jerks. They're weak, they don't know, so let's build an army, let's conquer.
So basically, humanity went backwards when they became individuals.
Exactly.
They de-evolved, and that was the birth of military science and
Yep.
conquering and all that. What led up to what we're...
Exactly. In fact, Cayce said the Atlantis crystal that was focusing solar and stellar energy and was rejuvenating all the bodies, you could come and be rejuvenated. He gave one lady 6,000 years she lived because she came before the crystal, and the radiation coming through the great Atlantis crystal would rejuvenate her chakras and her own cellular energy. Everybody was doing it. They started to shift it using the same, they turned it into the death ray.
Right. What we have today.
And now they could conquer, subordinate, overcome, kill. And they became the leaders. And that shift, you know, we're still wrestling with that today. We're still wrestling with imperialism and superiority, and we know what's best and you don't. Fourth root race is the body you and I are familiar with. 10,500 BC. The earth has been cleansed. The population has dropped severely. Genesis 6, we'll see it in a minute. Population has dropped significantly. There's hardly anyone here. And Edgar says now the goal was to repeople the earth in the Adamic body. And so souls started to come back in with this mission, build temples all around the planet, and breed. Okay, the final destruction of the ancient lands and Atlantis is 10,014 BC. Now you have the world as you know it today, and the history as you know it. This is all the prehistory of the ancient times. In Hebrew, Cain means acquired. Abel, where's Abel? Abel means breath. Abel is the pure essence of yourself. And remember, the author says God loves everything Abel brings forth, because Abel is life, breath, the pure essence of you. Cain is your acquired ego, which God wants you to develop. Know yourself to be yourself. But the first stages of it, Carl Jung even shifts the capital S self as your better self, your higher self. And the little s self is that one that's a little bit devilish, self-gratifying, self-seeking, only interested in itself. And that's the acquired development. And here Cain is just overwhelmed as it's growing with the purity of Abel. The same story with Isis and Osiris and Set and Osiris. Anyway, Cain kills Abel, simply overcomes your gentler self with its ego. But then Cain is very upset as to what has happened and gets in a conversation with God over the death of Abel. And Cain, egoistic self, can be better self or lower self. Sin, God, this is God speaking here. Cain, sin lies at the door of your consciousness. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. Do you see this is part of our growth? The Cain development within us is part of our growth. And do we grow toward the better self or the lower self, the lesser self? Edgar came straight out and said the only sin is self. All the others are just variations of it. All the others. So, in the dynamics of your judgment on yourself, when you start to get towards selfishness and self-thinking and self-consciousness only, you're getting lonelier, more separated, more individualized, you're in trouble. When you're relating with others and you start to think of how you can gratify yourself off of them or glorify yourself to them, you're getting individuated and lost again, and you don't sense the whole. So working more with this selfless sort of nature, or your better self for higher purposes, then you start to really take on new things. A good example are your animalistic urges, your human raw urges. Why do we subdue them, temper them? For higher reasons, higher purposes. And when you start doing that, you lift yourself into your higher nature, because you're subduing your lower nature for a purpose that's greater than gratification.